we can speak to Barry Gardiner, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. Morning to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And what we'd love is some clarity, which I'm hoping that you can give us. Let's talk first of all about the rights of EU citizens living in the UK. You've made an announcement about that today. On day one, what they would be allowed to stay. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely right, and I think there are very good reasons for that. First of all, it's the right thing to do. These are 3 million people who've been living here, working here, contributing to our economy. The second follows from that, and that is it would be hugely against our country's interest to have these people leave. They prop up our health service, they run businesses for us, they provide the intellectual firepower of some of our most important companies. So it's very important that we keep that skills base here in the UK. And finally, I think it would actually reset the tone of the negotiations. One of the really tragic things about the way in which the government has approached Brexit is that we find that we're more divided as a nation over it, and we're more isolated in Europe.
Right.
And I think what this will do is it will reset that relationship with the other member states in Europe and be a very positive way of starting the negotiations.
And as far as if you could explain to me what there will be no reciprocal rights for British citizens in EU guaranteed. Are you hoping that, are you sort of assuming there would be reciprocal rights, or how would you guarantee those rights?
I always find that if you're nice to people, they tend to be nice to you back. And if we do the right thing, I think they will also. But also, it's of course in their interest, just as it is in ours, to have British skilled workers in their countries. Many of them want to do that. They want the skills that we provide for them, just as we want the skilled workers that they provide for us. And so I think there's mutual benefit here.
Is that your negotiating position, being nice to people?
No, you always have to be tough in negotiations as well. But it doesn't mean that you can't approach it in a spirit of cooperation. I think that's actually really important, that the government has a nationalistic way of looking at Brexit rather than a patriotic one. Okay. Nationalists tend to think that the only way you can show your love of your own country is to do down other countries. Patriots actually believe that you can love your own country and cooperate with others. But there are other key differentiating points, and this is what Peter Mandelson seemed to want, and your intro suggested, that we must really convey, I think. And one of those is that the government is proposing this Great Repeals Bill. What that would actually do is it would take away the guarantees that underpin our rights in the workplace and our protections, our environmental protections and other protections that we have that are currently in place. And we've seen just yesterday in the courts where the government again went to get out of its obligations on air pollution. These are things that we want to embed, and that's why we've said, and Keir will be saying today, that we will bring in an EU rights and protections bill that guarantees those things into the future in law.
Can we talk also a little bit about what you're going to be tough on, and particularly about access to the single market, because it is clear from EU leaders, including Donald Tusk as well, and you will be familiar, that they are saying there is no access to the single market unless there is freedom of movement. Are you prepared then to agree there will be freedom of movement, yes or no?
Look, I'm sorry, you're wrong, because of course there is the internal market and there is access to the internal market, the single market. Americans access the single market. American companies do that. Indian companies do that. It's not about access, it's about membership and then abiding by the rules if you are a member. So if you are a member of the European Union, then you abide by the 4 freedoms that characterize the internal market. We are not going to be members of the European Union, and we will have to chart a new relationship with them over the issues of the 4 freedoms, including the free movement of people.
Okay, so
and actually earlier on your programme, Jim Cherry, I thought, spoke very well about how that new relationship ought to be from the Federation of Small Businesses. He wants as easy a way of ensuring that his companies, the companies that he represents, have the skills that Europe can provide. And we'll need a new way of doing that because we won't have the same free movement that we do now. We want it to be as friction-free as possible. We want it to be absolutely without any problems for British companies and people who want to come and work here and contribute to our economy.
Could you say at this point then whether you will accept free movement, yes or no?
Well, look, if the European Union allows us to have the benefits of the single market, if it allows us to have complete friction-free access, then that would be wonderful. If the price to, that they are seeking on that is that we have to adopt the four freedoms, then we would have to be part of the internal market. We would have to be a member of the European Union. They're not going to do that, and I think we need to be realistic. But these are points of process that will be part of the negotiation. The key thing that we want to stress, and that Keir will be stressing today, is that we will judge everything in terms of what it does for jobs and the economy, for the rights that we enjoy in the workplace, for the environmental protections that we need to have a secure country. These are the main principles. Now, we'll then have to negotiate all the other elements of that deal. But we will always judge it in that way.
We're always short of time here. I just want to ask you one last question, if I could, really. And it's sort of what you're indicating there about this idea of deal or no deal. From what we've heard today, Labour won't accept no deal. What do you mean by that? Is it Labour policy then to stay in Europe if you can't reach a deal?
No, look, let's be very clear. The government has said that no deal is better than a bad deal. That's wrong. No deal is the worst possible deal, and indeed we agree with the Confederation of British Industry that said no deal would be chaos. Now, the government's very keen on talking about chaos. What they don't actually do when they're talking about chaos is quote the Confederation of British Industry. The CBI has said their policy here is chaotic. Labour agrees with the CBI. We must get a deal. It must be one that we negotiate in good faith as partners. We won't be members of the European Union, but we want to be partners with them.
If there wasn't a deal, would you have a second referendum?
No, it's not about, look, it's not about a second referendum. This is about negotiating a deal that is in the best interest of the British economy, the best interest of jobs and growth here, and that embeds in our country the protections that we currently enjoy and that people don't want to lose, but which this government seems to want to get rid of. They see things like air quality as being a burden. We see it as being a protection. That's why we want to make sure that the deal we do brings all of that and secures all of that for our children's future.
Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade, Barry Gardiner, thanks for your time on Breakfast this morning.